Good afternoon. My name is Ellie Gold. I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. Before we get started, just a couple things here. If we can please shut off our cell phones, or at least put it on silent, if not anything else. We also, I'm told that there is an Arabic interpreter, so if anybody needs headphones, they're available in the back, I guess.
In the back.
Okay. Okay, so we have a fantastic panel today discussing the Muslim Brotherhood and its relationship to militant Islam. I know that there are a number of bills, both in the House and the Senate, along these lines, and I thought it would be a good idea to at least have some discussion about this and see what the deal is. I, as a moderator, am going to not participate in the conversation, but rather just moderate and let everybody else do the talking. Samantha? Okay, so my name is Ellie Gold. I'm the Vice President of the London Center. The London Center has been, was formed in the beginning of, in January of 2013, and the focus was the purpose was to focus on national security and foreign policy related issues. I know that the Congressman has votes about 130. I know another Congressman is going to be joining us, Darrell Issa, and he also has votes about 130, I would imagine. So let's get this, as they say, the road on the show. What I've done is I'm going to introduce each panelist as it's their turn to speak, and I'm going to give one sentence and then ask the panelists themselves to give them give a brief bio as to their background. So we have with us Congressman Louis Gohmert from Texas 1. Anyone who focuses on these issues knows exactly where he stands. So as they say, I don't know that he needs much more of an intro than that. Congressman?
Yay. Thank you. Well, it is a pleasure to be here, and I love. Can I call you Mr. Vice President? I sure
By all
like
means.
that. I love that idea.
I may be better than some of the others.
Well, we won't talk about present situation. But anyway, it's great to be here. It's great to be invited to be part of the London Center for Policy Research. Folks there, I've seen, they get it. They understand how at risk things are. But it is important, I think, to understand the relativity of things. This is not just an issue of radical Islam, although that is an issue. Carlos the Jackal, y'all heard of Carlos the Jackal. You know, he had commented some time back that the best way to bring down the United States is for socialists and, you know, Islamists to join forces, that it was not possible with either one, but together they could bring us down. And I was hearing a while ago that there may be a day of rage in America in the next few. Intellect question. I know how well I did on national standardized testing. I'm okay. And I know just in the last couple of weeks, in trying to engage in debate on the issue of what killed these innocent folks at the Orlando nightclub. And in the wee hours, I pointed out that it was radical Islam that killed these innocent victims. And immediately, Congressman from New Jersey yelled, "Then you're a racist." Now that confused me because I didn't realize Islam was a race. I thought there were people from many different races that believed in Islam. So that was intriguing. I said, he said he was pledging allegiance to the Islamic State. And I was told, so you're a racist. Anyway, it's hard to debate people that are coming from that position. And I said, he said himself he pledged allegiance, who's got her own legal issues at this time, but she got in my face and said, that's a lie because it happened in my district. And I said, no, these words came from his own mouth. We have a recording of him pledging allegiance to the Islamic State. And her debate point that's hard to argue with was, that's a lie because it happened in my district. And I said, your Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, I know she thinks she's a great Attorney General. She said he pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. And the response was cleverly, that's a lie because it happened in my district. Sometimes it's hard to really engage in meaningful debate, but I want to take you back to December 22nd, a story published in Egypt's Rose El Yusuf magazine, approved by the Muslim Brotherhood. It was written while Morsi was president, the Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt. And I've quoted from this story and been called an Islamophobe because I quoted from the story that the Muslim Brotherhood was proud of. And in this story, they proudly named 6 people who turned the White House, quote, from a position hostile to Islamic groups and organizations in the world to the largest and most important supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood, unquote. The 6 people named were Arif Ali Khan, Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security for Policy Development, and again, this story was December 22nd of 2012. Mohammed Al-Abieri, member of the Homeland Security Advisory Council, also from Texas. Of course, the Muslim Brotherhood calls their party in Egypt the Freedom and Justice Party. And amazingly, he started a charity, lost their 501c3 status when they wouldn't properly report, but he calls it the Freedom and Justice Charity. So anyway, a foundation rather. And I kept warning, look, the guy was a featured speaker at the Ayatollah Khomeini Man of Vision for the 20th century. He was a featured speaker. We don't know what was said there, but he was listed as a featured speaker to pay tribute. And I kept pointing out he was very defensive of the Holy Land Foundation trial, that it was wrong, even after they were convicted, clearly proving that they supported terrorism. He defended them repeatedly. And finally, after a couple of years of warning, actually 3 years of warning about his ties to the Muslim Brotherhood and support for people who had ties to radical Islam, he tweeted out after an American was killed on video that the international caliphate was inevitable, so we just need to warm up to the idea. At that, finally, Homeland Security said, well, his term is up as our top advisor, so we'll go ahead and let his term expire. Anyway, Rashad Hussain, the U.S. Special Envoy to the Organization of the Islamic Conference, Salam al-Mariyati, the co-founder of the Muslim Public Affairs Council, Imam Mohammed Majid, president of Islamic Society of North America. He was at that time. He also very close confidant of the president. The president consulted him. Apparently, he helped him with the president's speech in May of 2011, where the president was trying to upstage Prime Minister Netanyahu. He was on his way to address AIPAC here and also to speak to a joint session in Congress. The president went to the State Department. Mohammed Majid was there in the inner sanctum of the State Department. He was there and, taking credit for assisting the president. And then we have Ibu Patel, a member of the President Obama's Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships. Anyway, it's just rather amazing. Also wanted you to note that as of December 7, 2011, the Holy Land Foundation convictions were affirmed on all counts, and the three-judge panel unanimous 170-page opinion, despite what Mr. Elibieri said about it being gross injustice, the panel unanimously said that Hamas was created by Muslim Brotherhood operatives in 1987 as the Brotherhood's, quote, Palestinian branch, unquote. Thereafter, quote, the Muslim Brotherhood directed its worldwide chapters to establish so-called Palestinian committees to support Hamas from abroad. In the U.S., the Palestine Committee was led by Musa Abu Marzouk, who for a time in the early 90s actually ran Hamas from his home in Virginia. The Palestine Committee created not only the Holy Land Foundation, but a number of other Islamic entities in the U.S. The leaders of one of those entities, the Islamic Association of Palestine, subsequently created CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations, which was cited as an unindicted co-conspirator in the case and is one of the most prominent to be heard around the country. Then I wanted to quickly mention a couple of quotes from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's own pleading. He wrote it himself. He had books helping him do the translation at Gitmo, and I'm sure he's up next to be released from Gitmo. But he said, these are his own words. He's a smart guy. He may be crazy, but he's a very smart guy. He hates Americans. He said, in God's book, he ordered us to fight you everywhere we find you. Even if we were inside the holiest of all holy cities, the mosque in Mecca and the holy city of Mecca, and even during sacred months. In God's book, verse 9, Al-Tawbah, then fight and slay the pagans wherever you find them, and seize them and besiege them and lie in wait for them in each and every ambush. He goes through in very legalistic form, cites the premise for killing Americans, and then gives a quote from the Quran. He's a very intelligent, well-educated on the Quran. He says, God has demonstrated to us your mental and your defeated fighting moral status. Our religion is a religion of fear and terror to the enemies of God, the Jews, the Christians, and pagans. With God's willing, we are terrorists to the bone, so many thanks to God. And then he quotes from an Arab poet, we will terrorize you as long as we live with swords, fire, and airplanes. He forgot to mention guns, which is why we've got to outlaw guns, but I'm sure he was thinking guns instead of just saying swords, fire, and airplanes. Anyway, he says, we will make all our materials available to defend and deter and egress you and the filthy Jews from our country. God has ordered us to spend for jihad in this cause. Then finally he says, we fight you and destroy you and terrorize you. The jihad is God's cause and a great duty in our religion. We have news for you. The news is you will be greatly defeated in Afghanistan and Iraq, and that America will fall politically, militarily, and economically. Your end is very near, and your fall will be just as the fall of the towers on the blessed 9/11 day. We will raise from the ruins, God willing. We will leave this imprisonment with our noses raised high in dignity as the lion emerges from his den. We shall pass over the blades of the sword into the gates of heaven. So we ask God to accept our contributions to the great attack on America, and to place our 19 martyred brethren among the highest peaks in paradise. These are not friends of the United States. And the sooner people in America understand just the depth of the hatred here, then the sooner we will be able to defeat them. They have a strong foothold in the United States because of the goodness of the American hearts, not wanting to think people could be filled with this much hate. But it's there, it's a reality, and we have got to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman, I know that that you have votes in 10 minutes. So I want to ask Congressman Issa to raise your remarks.
Well, thank you. And, following Louis Gohmert is always, it's impossible. So rather than repeat, let me just have a positive contrast. People around the world who hate us, hate us. They are the minority. People around the world who organize hate, in fact, increase those numbers. And that's ultimately, when we talk about the Muslim Brotherhood, what it's all about. It's an organization that systematically promotes and increases hatred for Christians, for Jews, for the great Satan, the little Satan, in a Sunni version of what happens in Iran. Point that I'd like to leave you with, because I think talking points for all of us are extremely important, because you have to communicate to a great many people who don't understand, who are told, well, the Muslim Brotherhood is just another political organization, or Hezbollah is another political organization. The fact is, if you do not change a name from a name that is known for murder and hate, then you choose to try to remain a leopard, keep your teeth intact, chew on someone while telling them that you've become a pussycat. And that is where the Muslim Brotherhood was in the 80s after the assassination of Sadat. That's where they are today. And during the intervening period, they became politically significant enough that with an incredible misstep by the United States and other countries, we allowed Egypt to fall into a form of turmoil, to have a political misalignment that allowed them to come to power. And in the short period in which they were in power, they did not show all of the truths, but they showed a great many truths. The effects on Egypt are profound enough that Egypt made the decision to call the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, to ban them. And when you look at the on-the-street popularity of that decision, it goes without saying that, in fact, that is the will of the people of Egypt. So when we're looking as outsiders to the Muslim Brotherhood, what I ask us to do is to look at it in two tiers. Well, who they were when they took the name, who they were when they committed terrorist acts, who they were when they took power, and who they are today and will be if, in fact, we do not treat them as what they are and will always be under the name of the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think it's most insightful for us to realize that you can go from terrorist organization to terrorist organization, and you can realize that as long as they are willing to keep that name and the moniker and the slogans, they will not truly change their spots. And I think where Mr. Gohmert did a good job of defining some current rhetoric. I think for us in Congress, what we have to do is ask the people closest to the problem, what do they think? And in my many trips, and I note that my good friend Nick Rahal is here, in our many trips to the region, we met with the people who wanted peace and wanted prosperity for their people and were trying to achieve it, both in the business and the government. And what we discovered is this is, in fact, their decision to call the Muslim Brotherhood what it is and will always be, an organization of hate, It may have political aims, but those aims are much more similar to the aims that Iran enjoys after their forming of a caliphate. That is their goal. That is what I think we need to fight. So I didn't come here to make any longer a speech than that, and I could not dream of following Louis Gohmert and making it half as eloquent, but thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, Congressmen. What we have decided to do here today is, because I know that we have a lot of speakers, and I've passed out cards with for questions, and that towards the end of the discussion they'll be passed forward. If anybody has any questions, I would for the congressmen, since they have to go by in 5 minutes or 6 minutes.
More time.
Feel free to email them to us, and then we can forward it on to your offices. Does that work?
We can take a couple if you've got time, Louis.
you know.
Sure, okay, in that case,
Just, I'm Dan Collins, I'm the Zionist Organization of America. Just to be clear, you mentioned the name change is a symptom of the fact that they haven't changed their spots. If they should decide to change their names, which many Muslim groups in the United States have done, unfortunately, over and over again to confuse some Americans, surely that much more would have to be done than simply changing the name of Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. You have kind of a list in your mind about what the minimum requirements would be.
That's an excellent question, and I sort of mentioned it, and I said they haven't changed their rhetoric, and I think that's where the quotations of Louis come into mind. There are three elements that always go when you're trying to follow terrorism. There's the names of the organization, there's the rhetoric or themes, and then lastly, of course, there are the people and their tactics. So if you wanted to say, is there an organization that can be divorced from being the Muslim Brotherhood? Well, one, people of hate and terror seldom change their spots, and when they do, they almost always reject a status organization and go out on their own. That hasn't happened. Secondly, name changes do, as you say, do occur periodically, and when they do, if the people move or the tactics move or a combination of the two, you follow it. So I have no doubt the Muslim Brotherhood will continue to have its name because it has stuck to it for 80 years. But there are, as you know, organizations such as ISIS in the Sinai who have become much more directly militant, openly hostile, and are today killing and ambushing Egyptian soldiers as we speak, and who have blown up countless number, and by the way, who have also attacked and attempt to kill people on our peacekeeping base, which is obviously a multi-nation base that we had in the Sinai and have for almost half a century.
so we have time for two questions, Colin, and then Michael.
It's Colin Miller from Houston, Texas, out of Old Denver. A quick question about, between the videos and, you're a racist. What can the Congress do, or we as a nation to start? If you remember Reagan identified the enemy. He stood up and said the evil empire, the nation was behind it. It was a political leader at the top identifying the United States enemy. I haven't seen that in 8 years. I've seen, it's videos, it's really not that, it's the guns, you're racist. What can we do? Because until the nation recognizes, as America recognizes its leaders, recognize the enemy, then we can help these other nations like Egypt and others, I think. What can we do, or what can Congress do other than showing the door to the current administration to get this out and say, look, the United States recognizes it, we're not racist, this is the enemy, this is the issue. Not be afraid and fearful of it. Let's hit this head on. What's your opinion there? Because that's it, changing the message, right? They're changing the message.
What?
Exactly. Well, most members of Congress are very brave, and once they see that the American public supports something, they'll get behind it. And so, but seriously, there's truth in what I'm saying. What we have seen from the radicals are great activism. You would think that some of them would be more reluctant to step forward and be identified with the radical movement and condemning anybody that points out the real evil at work here. But that small minority has taken hold of the largest mouthpiece. But I can assure you, if enough Americans make clear that they want their member of Congress or senator to be outspoken on what the reality is, and that radical Islam is a threat, and that we need to recognize it and call it what it is, you will be amazed at the number of people here in Washington that will step forward and say, it's radical Islam. One of my Democrat friends who was in the ensemble yelling against me, when we were leaving the floor, and it's just him and me, he said, I've called it radical Islam for years now. Well, that's nice to whisper to me at the door. Why don't you say it down there in the well like you have everything else? But once it's acceptable because American majorities have let their voices be heard, you will hear it all over Washington. But Americans have got to step up.
Well, Louis gave you appropriately the domestic side of it. I'll take a chance to give the other side. American members of the House and the Senate, and hopefully an administration, we have to give voice to those voices around the world that cannot be easily heard. So when Egypt, no small country, declares the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, if we join with them and we add them explicitly to the list, we in fact give great amplification to that voice. And the same can be said of emerging terrorist groups around the world. Boko Haram, many of them have become sort of part of the ISIS Brotherhood affiliation. But the administration has often been slow to add. There's a sensitivity that, we don't know which way it's going. So it's good to have the State Department with you when you go overseas. It's good to come home and amplify what you really see and hear, and that often allows what the State Department will not do for various sensitive reasons to be done here. So I think that's part of our role, is listen to voices in America, we represent them. Listen to the voices around the world, because if America doesn't lead, often there is no one to follow.
And if I could add, end of August last year, I think the world of President Sisi, despite apparently from what people say that I'm an Islamophobe, I'm not afraid of Islam, Muslims, and we have some very dear friends, and I think President Sisi is one of them. He allowed me to meet, they said at that time I was the only member of Congress that was allowed to meet with the Director of Intelligence for about 2.5 hours. We've got some friends over there, and they understand what radical Islam is. They're Muslim. They don't want radical Islam, just like our Northern Alliance friends in Afghanistan. They don't want radical Islamists controlling Afghanistan, Egypt, Jordan. Didn't get to meet with Abdullah a couple of weeks ago, but met the king, but his uncle and also his son. And we've got some real friends there, and they recognize the danger of radical Islam. Those are people we should be working with, like Daryl says.
Can you take one more question?
Sure.
I have one question?
Yes, please. Middle East News Agency, Egypt. I just want to wonder, what's your role as a congressman or as the Congress in making any draft bill resolutions in order to ban the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, especially that you have said that, or the congressman said that we have to listen to the overseas as we have to listen to the Americans themselves. So what's your role, given that the Muslim Brotherhood is known as the cloak of most of the terrorist organizations?
Well, like you're obviously plugged in and aware, we have a bill to name the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization to take the lead from our Muslim friends in Egypt that recognize the threat, and the UAE, our Muslim friends there, they have recognized the threat. And frankly, their leaders in Middle Eastern countries, normally when we visit with these leaders, there'll be camera opportunities, and then the reporters have to leave. And then in the private meetings, it's not uncommon to get, what's wrong with you? You keep helping the Muslim Brotherhood. Do you not understand they have been at war with you for 40 years? When are you going to stop helping your enemy? And some of us wonder the same thing. But the movement is growing, and that's why I'm so pleased with the London Center, because they get it. And by doing events like this, more people become aware of what the real truth is. We're not Islamophobes. We have no problems with Muslims. We have problems with radical Muslims that want to destroy not only America, but the Democratic Republic in Egypt and the leadership in Jordan and places where they're friends. So thank you for being plugged in, and thank you for knowing enough to ask a question like that. I'm hoping by events like this, more people will notify their members of Congress to join those of us that are co-sponsors of the bill. And when we have enough co-sponsors, our leadership will bring it to the floor. And that'll be the first step on our way to actually recognizing our enemy officially. So thank you.
Congressman, do you know the bill number by chance?
I don't have the bill number, but all you have to do is say the bill that recognizes the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. And it's not hard to find. But
HR 38.
thank you very much.
There you go.
Speaking of being plugged in, there you go.
Thanks.
You.
Right on.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
I'm going to, our next speaker I'm going to ask is the London Center's president, Herb London, for his remarks. Herb?
It is a great pleasure to be with you, and I would be very remiss if I didn't point out that my dear friend Bud McFarland is with us today, former National Security Advisor to Ronald Reagan. And Bud, thank you for joining us. There are lots of things that I want to say, but first let me tell you a little story. The story is appropriate for Louis Gohmert before he leaves, as there are 3 very important lessons in life a wise man once told me about. One is never to climb a wall that leans towards you, never to kiss a woman that leans away from you, and never speak after Louis Gohmert. Now, I got a big problem, because Congressman Gohmert has, I think, covered this area very well indeed. But let me point out a couple of things that were not mentioned during the course of his presentation. The first is that the Muslim Brotherhood has had ties to hate organizations from its very beginning in 1928. There were ties to the Nazis in the 1930s, some of you will recall. There was the funding of Al-Qaeda. The first funding of Al-Qaeda came from the Muslim Brotherhood. And then in addition, we now see that the Muslim Brotherhood has ties to ISIS. So when we talk about the Muslim Brotherhood, we're talking about an organization that has been involved with terrorism since its origins in the late 1920s. The other point that I would like to make is that when Mubarak fell, that was the first revolution, there were 2 revolutions in recent times in Egypt, but when Mubarak fell, there was no organization that could follow politically. As a consequence, the Muslim Brotherhood, which was organized, did run Morsi. Morsi, you may remember, said, "I will never run for president." Now, he did run for president, and he was elected. As a consequence, there are people in our State Department who believe that because he was elected democratically, we should support him. The consequence of that is that there was a charm campaign organized by our State Department that had Muslim Brotherhood members travel the country and suggest that they were really quite moderate, very much interested in the United States, very willing to deal with minorities in their own country, including the Coptic population, and so an impression was created. This was very interesting because I went to a Council of Foreign Relations meeting where there were 5 of the most attractive people I've ever seen in my life were seated in front of me. They were called the members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Each one wore a $500 suit. The young lady who was there looked like a young Merle Oberon, a very attractive woman wearing a scarf on her head. There was a Prada scarf. They were outfitted perfectly. They came right out of Central Castle. And the impression was created, these are reasonable people that you can deal with. Now what the Egyptians told the world is that they are not so easy to deal with. And after a year, you have the second revolution with 33 million Egyptians on the streets of Egypt. And what goes from there? 90 million people in the country. 1/3 of that population was on the streets of Egypt, demonstrating against Morsi. And Al-Sisi, he was a man who became a hero because Morsi said, "Fire on those demonstrators." He refused to do so. As a consequence, he became a national hero. And of course, later elected president of the country. But the one thing that people overlook, and to which we have given scant attention, El-Sisi gave a speech at Al-Azhar, roughly a year and a half ago. That speech was very interesting because he said we have violence within our religion. And at the end of it, he used the words, "We need a revolution from within." Now, one might have assumed, when a speech of that kind is given, that it would be embraced by the President of the United States and by every American. It was given scant attention. Aside from a one-inch reproduction in the Wall Street Journal, I could not find an editorial anywhere in the United States that paid attention to El-Sisi's speech. It was a little like Martin Luther's speech talking about the 95 Theses. challenging his own religion to deal with the questions of militancy and extremism. And that was, in my judgment, a remarkable moment that we should have seized on. If you want to deal with people who want to kill you, one of the ways to deal with them is to say, let's find those within the religion, pious Muslims, who are eager for some kind of systematic change. Al-Sisi was that person, is that person. And it seems to me that more should be done in the United States to give attention to that effort. It is also a great danger. So we no longer recognize an enemy that is within. It is now seen as a legitimate voice of the Muslim people. It is not a legitimate voice. It's an extremist voice. And what we have done at the London Center is not only spend time on this, but we have a new book that I urge you to get on Amazon, only $15, excuse me for the commercial pitch. It's called The Encyclopedia of Militant Islam, which deals with 44 of the major terrorist groups in the world and what they are attempting to accomplish. Now, in general, we know what they want to accomplish. The caliphate, of course, the introduction of Sharia, the use of jihad as a methodology. But what we do not know are the tactics of individual organizations, where they exist, what kind of funding they get. And that is incorporated into this book so that we can start to understand who the enemy is and what we have to do. Now, there's often the question, what does the United States have before it? It has an enormous challenge. It has a challenge that in some ways is unprecedented, but not completely. People forget that we are fighting a war not only on the battlefield, not only with guns and bullets, we are fighting an ideological war against this radical Islamic threat. And how do you fight that kind of war? Well, you're not only fighting by being on the battlefield and being successful and not providing people with a safe zone, we also fight it on an ideological front. And we have a template for it. It's called the Cold War. We fought communism not only in the battlefield in Korea, not only in the battlefield in Vietnam, we fought it with ideas. And we are capable of resurfacing that same playbook again. And let me tell you what's in that playbook. There are logistics, there's intelligence, penetration of the enemy, clandestine officers, and dirty tricks. There are cultural activities, all within the framework of fighting against an enemy. There's ridicule, all in the name of fighting this threat. When I went to Eastern Europe years ago, towards the end of the fall of the Communist Empire, I remember chatting with people in university, and if you asked the question, are you a Marxist-Leninist? They would all laugh. Because at that point, it was ridicule. Marxism, Leninism, are you kidding? It was gone. We have to do the same thing with radical Islam. Make the case that it is absurd. If you want to leave this world in a box, we have a way for you to do that. But it's important for the United States to understand this is a threat. This is a long war, and it's a war that is not only fought on a battlefield, it's fought in our educational institutions, it's fought in our cultural institutions, and it's fought with our intelligence community. We are not doing that at the moment. This is the challenge. It's not only a challenge for you, it's not only a challenge for today, it is a challenge for the generation. Because this too is a long war, a generational war. And we can win it. The playbook is clear, we know what we have to do. The challenge is, when do we start? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Herb. I'm going to move to the other side of the table now. I'm pleased that we have with us Mahmoud Kabil. He's an award-winning Egyptian actor. Spends time both here in the States and in Egypt. He's also UNICEF's Goodwill Ambassador to the Middle East and North Africa.
Thank you for having me. Too bad that Congressman Gomert left. Too bad. I was going to ask him a question. Back in '67, I was in the reconnaissance troops of the Egyptian army, and I saved the life of my enemy, Captain Yair Barak, who was downed in a parachute, and I captured him in the desert of Sinai, and I saved his life, and now we're best friends. Does that make me, and I'm a Muslim, and I believe in Islam. So when someone, without intention, call my religion radical Islam, why generalize?
No, I think he was just talking about the radical.
No, well, that's it. That's it. In order to gain, and this is a message, in order to gain all Muslims in our fight against terrorism, in order to gain everybody, all the Muslims that are here in the States or all around the world, don't call their religion radical. Because when you generalize, they would answer you, should we call Hitler and all his cabinet were Catholics by that Catholicism? There is a thing called radical Catholicism or radical Christianism. Why generalize? I'm here today. I flew from Berkeley, California, and I just had a 4-time hip surgery, total change. And I came, it's been only maybe 10 weeks. I'm not supposed to be here. My doctor said, there is a danger. But I came here to take part in branding the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. And not only the Muslim Brotherhood, but also its affiliate that already has been called Muslim terrorist organization, Hamas. And I don't know how people here don't make the difference. Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood. The founder of Hamas is a part of the Muslim Brotherhood. So most Muslims are against terrorism. All the victims that we see in Egypt, you have to, and unfortunately here the media is not mentioning that, are all Egyptian soldiers. They're all Muslims. They're fighting terrorism. Everywhere in the Muslims countries, like, in Iraq lately, or in Turkey, or in Syria, that's Muslims against Muslims. So you alienate, and this is coming from a Muslim, you alienate moderate, if I say moderate Muslims, or the majority of Muslims, when you call their religion radical. I just wanted to make that point. But also, I want to thank, Congressman Gomer, that he said at the end, we don't have a problem with Muslims. We have a problem with radical Muslims. Why not say that? Radical Muslims, not radical Islam. And I believe in order to protect this nation that is so dear to all of us, is not to use labels, not to label a majority, a big religion of over almost 2 billion people, and consider the terrorism that is perpetrated by a minority of people, and generalize the whole thing and call the religion of the remainder that it's radical. I know that people say, no, we're talking about radical Muslim, not good Muslim. There is no radical. You're talking about radical Islam. This Islam is a religion. Islam means surrendering. And I think that, people, and I already gave that message to people from the State Department, because I was there during the revolution. I took an active part in Maidan al-Tahrir. I was there with the youngsters. We were there. After that, I was there. I was the head of the veterans against Morsi and against the Brotherhood. We were training young people, and we took part in getting rid of the Muslim Brotherhood in June 2013. So I felt everybody was there. I talked to people in the State Department. That time it was before it was Margaret Scobie, Ambassador Margaret Scobie, until June, and then after June it was Ann Patterson. And I told these people, I told them, guys, you didn't do your homework. I mean, you have to understand that the roots of Muslim Brotherhood, that the motherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood is the mother lode of all terrorism around the world. Just read Sayyid Qutb. Read Sayyid Qutb, what he's saying. This is exactly the Wahhabi belief not accepting anybody else that don't have your beliefs. And this is not Islam. And it's not because under the Bush administration that some of the youngsters and the approach that were made by Muslim Brotherhood through Dr. Ibrahim, Saaduddin Ibrahim, they were telling me from the State Department, but they're moderate people, they're liberal. They're not liberal. A Muslim Brotherhood member would tell you anything. He will tell you that maybe he's a communist or he's a capitalist, anything, to just get to what they want. So this is why I really, I'm sorry that I made in the first, introduction, I made that difference, that semantics about radical Islam and radical Muslims, but I'll do anything, to help and to give any data or whatever details about that period where we had the Muslim Brotherhood and how we got rid of the Muslim Brotherhood, in order to label that organization that it is a terrorist organization. This is a terrorist organization. This is the mother lode of terrorism around the world. This is the mother of ISIS. And we allow people from the Muslim Brotherhood to go to the University of California, Berkeley, and give a lecture to American people. And thank God I was there to attend to correct what they said and telling them, you know what? The origin of terrorism is Sisi. And the fact is that if you read Sisi from the other way around, it's ISIS. So this is the roots of terrorism. How can you be so and allow people like that to go and give lecture in Berkeley, California? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your points there. Well, we're going to do is we're going to take questions at the end because everybody has a schedule. So we're going to take questions at the end. And as I said before, for the members of Congress, I'm going to say the same thing here as well. And that is, if we run out of time, please feel free to email it to us, and we'll certainly get an answer from whomever the question is posed to. Our next panelist is Samantha Leahy. Unfortunately, with everything that's going on in Dallas, in Texas right now, the senator was unable to join us. But Samantha is one of the senator's senior foreign policy staffers, and all yours.
Hi. I just wanted to review the Muslim Brotherhood Terrorist Designation Act with you. It is S-2230 in the Senate. Senator Ted Cruz has introduced it with Representatives Mario Diaz-Balart and Representative Gomer. It urges the Secretary of State to designate the Brotherhood as a foreign terrorist organization under Section 219 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. The Muslim Brotherhood, the United States has officially listed individual members, branches, and charities of the Brotherhood as terrorists, but has not designated the organization as a whole. So this bill recognizes the simple fact that the Brotherhood is a radical Islamic terrorist group. They pose a direct threat to the national security of the United States as they've outlined their strategic goals for North America, mainly their process known as civilization jihad. That is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers, their quote. U.S. officials have even testified that the Muslim Brotherhood, both in the United States and overseas, has supported terrorism, by leveraging U.S. financial institutions and resources for their own campaign. Richard Clark, a former counterterrorism official under Bush and Clinton, said, "The common link here is the extremist Muslim Brotherhood. All of these organizations, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Al-Qaeda, are descendants of the membership and ideology of the Muslim Brothers." So we need to stop and we need to reject the fantasy that this is a parent institution and it's not a political entity. This is a common sense step. We need to stand with our allies like Egypt, the UAE, even Saudi Arabia and Russia have designated the Brotherhood as an organization. So this is a reality check, and we need to stay up to date with this threat.
Thank you, Samantha. And I also want to thank Senator Cruz, and you can pass this along, for actually hosting us today and hosting us in this room as well. We're just moving on quickly. I know that we will have time for questions, and I'm sure that we'll have time for everybody here to participate in those as well. London Center Senior Military Fellow, Major General Bob Newman, is here. He's Bob was a former Adjutant General of Virginia National Guard, and I thought it would be a good addition to this discussion to focus on homeland issues.
Thanks, Ellie. As Adjutant General, I commanded in Virginia was 10,000 airmen and soldiers whose duties included homeland defense of the Commonwealth. Part of the concern I've had is the terrorist threat continues to grow from inside the United States, is the stealth tactics that they use to cloak their true methodology. The Muslim Brotherhood in the past has worn many cloaks, a chameleon, if you will. It's changed color to suit its environment. For example, if you were in Jordan, for example, then they would be a collaborative organization. If you were in Egypt, and correct me if I'm wrong there, then you would be an opponent, but a pacifist type of opponent. One that doesn't harm the society. And then if you were in perhaps Syria or Libya, one of the more conflictive states, then you would be an open opponent of the government there. That is a real threat to our country, and it threatens the regime in which I worked, which is the states. Many of you know from personal experience, and either having experienced a disaster, a natural disaster such as a hurricane or a flood, or perhaps those of you that live here in Washington underwent the trials of 9/11 when traffic came to a stop and quite often lives were disrupted. Well, the National Guard plays a vital role in continuing society. Everything from logistical support to hospitals, to communication centers, to government itself, to providing military support to authorities to protect the national interest. The Guard has a role to play. And in the United States, as the Brotherhood continues to assimilate into society, to become part of the fabric of America, to show that we are here to be friends, to change our skin, so to speak, so that we will be looked at as a peaceful organization, it poses a real threat. My real concern happens to be not from an attack from a Muslim Brotherhood that would be a kinetic type of attack, one that would use military tactics, military weapons to attack our structure, but non-kinetic forces, things such as cyber attacks, things such as EMPs, electronic magnetic pulse, where you can disrupt an electric grid by high electromagnetic currents to certain areas, biological warfare, things such as this that pose a threat that could be developed from within society from unsuspected locations, whether it's a mosque or a local gathering of folks seemingly with no malintent to the American population. I'm concerned that the Brotherhood and terrorist organizations like it, assimilating in the fabric of our country, will pose a real threat through non-kinetic means. And that is an issue, I think, that has been unaddressed, but one that we should focus on.
Thank you, General. And our final speaker today is Dr. Michael Morgan. Michael has a television program in Egypt. It's one of the largest, or the largest, pro-American television program in Egypt. Has 1.5 million viewers or so.
Actually, a lot more,
Oh.
40 million in the Middle East.
Oh, well, there you go. So I stand corrected. Michael?
Thank you. First of all, thanks for everybody that is in the room that made the time to come in, our elite audience. Thanks for the London Center to put this together. Special thanks for Senator Ted Cruz's office to allow us to be here, and we're sorry that he couldn't make it, but he had sent somebody on his behalf, which was great. I would like also to especially thank Ellie Gold, because him and we've been trying to put this together for like 6 months now, nonstop work. Herb London has been a great support, so let's start with that. I would like to talk about why I'm interested in this particular subject. I had come to the United States 17 years ago. I had pretty much $100 on me. I came in for a better opportunity. I started my life from scratch, and I don't want to talk too much about what happened, but I feel very, very loyal to my home country, Egypt, and very, very loyal and appreciative to the United States that had given me the chance to become who I am today, despite all the bumps that were happening to get me to where I am now. I started American Pulse TV show just to bridge the gap between the two governments over the last 4 years, between the Egyptian government and the current American administration that has clearly showed a lot of support to the Muslim Brotherhood, who we declared, or my original country had declared in Egypt as a terror group. And I'm not an attorney by profession, but I'd like to build my case. And I'm sorry, Ellie, if I'm going to take a little more than what I should, but 1 more minute. I'd like to build the case because we have to check the pattern of the Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood, they started after the destruction or the dissolving of the caliphate in Turkey in 1925 by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. And Hassan al-Banna, which is an Egyptian guy, has started in 1928, exactly in March, to build this organization. And the reason I'm going back is just because we need to know how they started, how they function, and so we can expect and detect what they're going to do next. So few things, their plan usually, he wanted to start this organization on 3 generations. So he said, I have no problem with the first generation not to do anything. I just want people to listen to me. So he used to go out, go in coffee shops, go to restaurants, meet people at their homes, and just start talking to them and trying to implement. And I'm, not defending the congressman, but I think the congressman meant the Islamic extremist, not the radical Islam as a religion. He's talking about the people, not the religion.
Why don't you say it?
Well, he's not here now. I'm very sure that's what he meant. So basically, this is the first stage. The second stage was the execution, or trying to get a plan together and get people to execute the plan. So this happened in 1948, and I'm sorry if I'm going to be a little boring with the dates, but it shows how they function. So what they did is they used them for the war, and then they started going against the British and the American embassy, and they wanted to bomb it. So the judge, Al-Khazindar, he decided to imprison 2 of their guys because they were convicted of trying to bomb English stores and cafes and stuff like that. And so they decided to kill him, and not just to take a revenge because they imprisoned 2 people. And this is what I'm thinking. They killed him because they wanted to send a message to all the judges for the future. You play with us, we kill you. You imprison us, we kill you. So the terror was like a very fundamental part of their strategy. They just trying to terrorize everybody, and I think that's what they have been doing. So after that, they started getting close to Nakrashi Basha, which is the prime minister. And then he found them that they also doing bombings, and he found weapons and everything. So he decided to dissolve for the first time and dismantle the organization. So first they come close to the power, and then they go against it. That happened the first time. Second time happened with Nasser in 1952. They hijacked the revolution. They tried to help him out. He was their friend. He was part of the group. And then when he didn't give them enough piece of the cake, they went against him. So they tried to kill him in 1954 when he gave that his famous speech in Manchia. So again, they became close to him, and then they trying to kill him. I'm trying to build a pattern here. So they go with Sadat. Sadat wanted somebody to back him up against Nasser in 1970s. So they go close to Sadat, they support him, and the minute that he turned over them and put him in jail, they killed him. So why wouldn't they do the same thing to the US? This is the point what I'm trying to get. Why, this is the pattern has been repeating itself at least 5 times. They clearly do, and exactly like Mr. Mahmoud Kabil said, they'll tell you anything. He'll tell you I'm a communist. He'll tell you I'm Jew, I'm Christian, I'm anything. Whatever you want to hear it. They come, I couldn't even believe it. They supporting the gay rights where in their books, Islam is against homosexuality.
All the books.
All the books. So, I mean, you know, not them, you know what I mean? Like they'll just go against their beliefs just to get to where they want to go. So I urge the Americans to rise and to be aware because it comes to the point where it's too late to save this country. That's it.
Thank you, Michael. It was requested by our panelists that the questions just be asked. So Michael is going to have I think a mic to walk around with. Well, you're up front. I guess we'll ask your question.
Yeah, just 1 second. I'm sorry. So we'll just.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, please. And identify yourself, please.
My name is Richard Douglas. I guess the only thing going on here is I'm an Iraq veteran. Spent a lot of time in Afghanistan and Pakistan too. And I wanted to say thank you for these heartfelt comments. It was really a pleasure to hear you, and thank you for rescuing your new Iraq. But I would like it if the panel could talk a little bit, please, about Turkey and about Iran post-agreement.
I think one of the most disastrous foreign policy decisions was the move to allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. And I say allow very carefully because if Iran were to comply with the agreement, they would have nuclear weapons in roughly 10 years. But that means they would have to comply. We already see violations that have occurred, so the likelihood is they'll have nuclear weapons sooner. This has been permitted, you see the violations, and there is no snapback. So despite all of the assurances that were given to the United States and to people in this country, there is no snapback. As a consequence, Iran has a virtually free run about its future and its nuclear future, which is devastating to the area. The tilt to Iran was based on the proposition that Iran would be the stabilizing influence in the Middle East. It would counter the Sunni control over large parts of the territory and its influence, and this minority, roughly 15% of the Shia population, would be the counterweight to whatever the Sunnis were doing. It's a misguided theory, it's a misguided proposition, and it's been misguided in application. And as far as Turkey is concerned, Erdogan, in my judgment, is a kind of political schizophrenic. He has one foot in the moderate camp, that is NATO, and he has one foot in the radical camp. And what we have to do is to either say to him, either you're with us in NATO or you're not. And if you're not, then you don't belong in NATO. There are obvious advantages for Erdogan to remain in NATO, but at the same time, he plays a very dangerous game. He has been buying oil from ISIS and at the same time says he's fighting ISIS. So it's not at all clear what Turkey will do in the future. Turkey has a very powerful air force and a very powerful military apparatus that could be used effectively in the wars in the Middle East. But the problem is, it's not clear whether in fact they're an ally or not an ally. There's a lot more I could say about that, but I don't want to dominate the time here.
Thank you.
Turkey?
If anybody has an answer.
Well, I'm interested in the Turkey part, but I'll go after Mr. Kabil.
Well, Erdogan,
Oh, okay.
who claimed to be of the United States of America and member of the NATO and wants to be part of Europe Unie, hasn't delivered what he should. Erdogan is one of the main champion of the Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan is calling Sisi a murderer because what happened in Rab al-Adawiyya, the stand-up in Rab al-Adawiyya, which is in any country, if people goes to Madison Square and occupy Madison Square and say this is our part of the country and because we believed in whatever, I think the mayor of New York will call the National Guard to help him get rid of these people. And obviously, because of, everybody has the right to have a gun here, it's going to be a catastrophe. They would have, and this is what happened in Egypt. This is what happened in Egypt. They've been warned, the Muslim Brotherhood were warned to leave that part, go out, children and women, please go out. And they did not. The leadership left them and left innocent people get killed. I disagree, and I don't believe, I disagree in killing an innocent soul or any soul. I disagree with crime. But, these are the result of miscalculation. And that miscalculation was done by the Muslim Brotherhood leadership at that time. So Erdogan, now when we look at the map, you have Iran, you have Turkey, you have Saudi Arabia trying to have an axis either with Iran and the Emirates and all these people against with the Turkey, and Turkey is now flirting with Iran. So the responsible for all that is Erdogan. And I don't think that Erdogan is a real friend of the West. Erdogan wants to have his agenda, which is the Muslim Caliphate, like Michael mentioned. He has the same agenda of Hassan al-Banna. So this is Erdogan.
Thank you. I see a hand in the back.
Oh, hi, Kevin Ronowitz. Kevin Ronowitz here. Since we're designating terror organizations today, should Saudi Wahhabis be considered a terror organization for the intellectual control over a lot of America and Europe and the world?
Did you have a question?
I don't want to dominate it. If someone else wants to take it, then Ken, thank you for the question.
I didn't hear the question.
Michael, go ahead.
Go ahead, Herb, if you want. Okay.
I didn't hear the question.
He's saying that, I think if I get this right, he's asking what, since we're labeling certain groups today as terrorist group and classifying them as a terror group, then Saudi Wahhabis should be part of these groups since they control mosques, you said?
Definitely, I agree with you, sir. Definitely. Wahhabism is coming from Ibn Taymiyyah, and Wahhabism is the motherlode also of the Muslim Brotherhood, who is the motherlode of terrorism, international terrorism. Wahhabism is now turning against the Al Saud, who are Wahhabis also, but they're turning against them now, and they want, Bin Laden is one of the examples that I can give you. He's a Wahhabi, and he wanted to get rid of the Al Saud. So let's forget about the Al Saud now because they have interest with the United States, but it's who is behind all that terrorism are Wahhabi families in Saudi Arabia, in other countries, Arabic countries that are financing these terrorist organizations until now. And I think we have to point out that and to take, just to label not only the Muslim Brotherhood, but the people financing all these terrorist organizations. That should be labeled too.
I really believe, to top it off, I really believe that we should label any group as a terror group today and any time in the future, whoever allows anybody else to take somebody's soul that does not belong to them. So if any group preaches killing, any group preaches terrorizing people, they are a terror group. So I don't care where they're coming from, I don't care where they are. I think nobody has the right to take anybody else's life.
Ken, you raise a point, however, about the influence of Wahhabism in mosques in the United States. And that is profound, largely because they have exported the Wahhabist beliefs to mosques everywhere in this country. And so that is a danger. When I said before that we are engaged in a doctrinal war and we have to understand the nature of the enemy, part of it is understanding what is happening in the large majority of mosques in the United States where, in fact, Wahhabism has penetrated those organizations. And so you need a counter view, a counter narrative that I think is necessary. And that's what I was getting at when I said the tactics that have to be employed in the future.
Dustin?
Hi, Dustin Stockton, Breitbart News. I've heard a lot of good reasons why we should name the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. I was hoping the panel could expound on what the official classification would do to the Muslim Brotherhood's operational and financial ability to...
Samantha?
So designating the Muslim Brotherhood would, in effect, give State Department more leeway in order to open up investigations into the financial routes that they are utilizing overseas and how they are getting into the U.S. So with each designation, there needs to be certain thresholds that are met, such as it needs to be a foreign organization, it needs to be engaging in terrorist activity, which is a host of different things, such as material support. And it also needs to threaten the security of the United States nationals. So the argument against designating the Brotherhood is that people don't believe it's a threat to U.S. nationals. And what they're not fully understanding is, again, what Herb just said, the nature of this group to destroy Western civilization from within. And so they're posing as charities. They're posing as educational institutions. And that is something that our government is not currently looking at. And so that's why this designation is needed.
Amir?
What is the Arab League doing about this? Essentially, this session is so expected, allocated to the Arab League to change the perception of Arab League.
I think the Arab League should do something about it. But the Arab League is mostly financed by petrodollars. And if you're financed by petrodollars, then you're financed by Wahhabis. And if you're financed by Wahhabis, the Arab League will never condemn the Muslim Brotherhood. They will be neutral, and that's a shame.
I think you know, as President Sisi and Dr. Herb London had mentioned that he stood there in Al-Azhar and he gave the speech to the imams. I think fixing the problem has to come from within. I really think what we're doing today is great, and you know, we should do more of these events because we need to expose the ideology. And the minister, Sameh Shukri, had spoken into the United Nations back in May when Egypt was the president of the Security Council. And it was for the first time an Egyptian Muslim leader, minister, saying that we have a problem together with Sisi. They said, we have a problem. And I think the beginning of fixing the problem is to realize that we have a problem. So I think fighting ideology is very, very important. I think exposing the issue is very important. I think talking about it and trying to educate people with the proper Islam and proper religion and overall the humanity, like everybody has to respect everybody else. There's no way 1.3 billion people, like Sisi said, that will convert 7 billion people to Islam. It's never going to happen.
Thank you. I know that we're running out of time, or we ran out of time, actually, because I know that our panelists have to catch trains and get back to work and so on. But I do want to thank...
Josh had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Josh, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick question to follow up on last week. I just had a curiosity, when you indicated that having the designation give leeway to the State Department, given the current State Department and field one. I'm curious, is there any is there any obligatory action that has to be in context of the President? For example, money we give to the Palestinian Authority, there's triggers if Hamas gets into Hamas. Is there anything like that currently standing or general FTOs that would force the State Department?
Yes, one of the biggest restrictions is a ban on coming into the U.S. physically and also monitoring of their money transfers.
All right. Well, anyway, we have, and as I said, our panelists have to run to their next places. However, whoever is available to stick around will answer as many questions as you have, I'm sure. But I do want to thank Congressman Darrell Issa, Congressman Louis Gohmert, Mohammed Kabil, Michael Morgan, Major General Bob Newman, Samantha, and Herb London. I do encourage everybody to take a look at the London Center's website. This video has been recorded on behalf of the London Center and will be on our website if you need to refer to it again. With that, I thank everybody for coming.
I have no. Is that here? You have an engagement ring on?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
This part, okay. I might have missed it.
All right, I hope to see you. Hope this, let's see here. I need.
Co-director.
Okay. I can
But we're in favor of it, as you know. We're in favor of it. Just keeping them out of the country is a big deal. It's something that is unbelievable. And they bring them to the State Department and to the White House. To the White House. I wasn't there in person, so
Does the executive get waivers if they decided they wanted to have, whatever dignitary even should we get a designation? Are they able to do that? And are they able to do that in a way that Congress isn't?
Right back. There are two things. Number one, we are doing better offensively, so we're able to pinpoint these IP addresses. We usually have a lot of that.
I'm just curious if there's like a reporting requirement. Regardless,
We're doing a better job of identifying where these emanate, these patterns, tax demands. My concern is it hits us and it takes us down.
Samantha.
Usually like this, we're going to split the bill like
Yes,
so much
TJ.
nothing.
And then Leahy, L-E-A.
It's not just localized, it's regional, we have to commit a nationwide effort.
Oh, legislative assistant.
It almost can be a squirrel sitting on a phone. So I can go on down, I don't go to the dark side too much, but you can have nightmares about that.
just want to know how it's going on so far.
Oh, how it's going?
Yeah.
We've been gaining traction, actually. I'd be happy to send you an update.
Yeah, please, because you see, this is very important for us in Egypt.
I just came back from Cairo last,
Yeah, that's right.
with Louis Gomer.
Okay, that's good, but we want to follow up this, and this is my business card.
I will certainly email you.
Yeah, please, because we just want to follow up on this issue and just to see how is the U.S. is interested.
I lose my ESP. My life goes down. I can't do this. So I need to find a way to keep that up.
Absolutely. I should definitely send you an update on what's going on and who's joined.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely. Wonderful meeting you. Hi. Sorry, no, sorry. It's my bad. Okay.
We were actually concerned with the language. I mean, it's a general broader concern about how
Okay.
because obviously like that name can be stayed this long and target for the entire faith.
I'm going to talk you through Alex. I'll be awake. Thank you.
Brotherhood also, I know it's very specific to Egypt.
Right.
Nice to see you, Tim. Good to see my current friends.
They do. We're supposed to be brothers and sisters in Islam, so we are all supposed to be fair. So the average thinks that we're supposed to be
Is that right?
I think adding language.
Well, it's a fact of life. Not today, but no, okay. I cannot.
Yes, I see what you're saying. I actually would like to send you a copy of the bill. What is... Okay. I don't. I'm so sorry. I'm right down the hall, though. Yes, please. I will actually email you a copy, a draft of the bill. So you can see there actually is, I don't believe there's anything in the bill that it really is. Hi.
You remember?